Hi everyone, I will be explaining chapter 17 of the book Coercion and Its Fallout by Sidman. And chapter 17 was called Positive Reinforcement at Home and School. So let me just pull up my notes real quick. Okay. So, first I'm going to start with the at-home portion. So this chapter splits up positive reinforcement in the home and positive reinforcement at school. So I'm first going to start with the at-home. So this chapter starts off talking about how children are constantly experiencing new things, such as different sights, sounds, reactions within their environment that they are in. Since children are always experiencing new things, they often bombard adults with questions and need help understanding the new things that they are seeing. Although this can become very annoying, we cannot react to our kids in an annoyed way and cause them to eventually stop asking us questions because they feel the tension of our annoyance, which in the end is actually a form of punishment. So there is no learning manual when it comes to becoming a parent. We all know that. And we all know that every child learns to demand their wants and needs in different ways depending on their age. For example, babies cry to communicate their needs, and as they become adults, they become verbal and they're able to communicate their wants and needs through conversations and talk. But sometimes, as we all know, children, such as ones who are on the spectrum, never learn effective ways to communicate. So they turn to aggression and self-injurious behaviors and property destruction as an outlet to communicate their wants and needs. This causes parents to seek any type of time away from their child to get some peace and quiet, which results in them using punishment, punishing consequences, such as escaping the child, avoiding the child, or even in worst case scenarios, aggressing towards their child. Sidman talks about how this is a lot of times where child abuse comes into play because a parent just cannot handle their child's behavior, that they just seek any form of punishment to get away from their child, and that sometimes is where child abuse comes into play. Obviously, we know that this is no way to treat a child, and using punishment will cause the child to not develop or adapt constructively in their environment. So what do? So we replace any type of punishment with the opportunity for the child to obtain a positive reinforcer. Example, when a child is crying, instead of ignoring the child, we bring the child a toy to try to make it happy. So we know that we're not going to avoid that child while it's crying. That's a form of punishment. Instead, when a baby is crying, we try to make a funny face or give it a toy or give it something that we know it wants as a reinforcer to help that crying stop. Now, let's think more into this. If positive reinforcement becomes available when the child behaves badly, does this create a message for the child? So it actually does. So here's an example. If a child only gets attention when he cries, then he will continue to cry in order to receive that positive reinforcement of attention. Therefore, positive reinforcement can be a way to strengthen bad behavior if used in the wrong way. Such as only giving love or attention or toys only when the child acts bad to make that behavior stop. If we use positive reinforcement consistent throughout the day, non-contingent of bad behavior, then the child will learn that I don't actually have to act bad in order to get what I want. Another important thing Sidman explains is that it is good to stay alert and to look for the signs that the child is exhibiting that shows an onset of behavior. As soon as these signs are shown, we should immediately jump in to try to get the child to do something good instead of waiting for the full-blown behavior to occur. However, going off of this topic, we need to discuss the threats that do come along with over-reinforcing a child. So over-reinforcing a child is when you give them toys, attention, food, anything that is appealing to them, even in the instance of no antecedent behavior that caused no behavior at all. So you're just reinforcing the child for no apparent reason, not for good behavior, not for bad behavior, you're just reinforcing them. So this can teach the child multiple things. So one, it teaches the child that anything goes, that no matter their behavior, if it's good or bad, they're going to get reinforced. So this child will grow up in society thinking that anything goes. I can act any single type of way and I'll still get what I want. Second, the child will never get to experience the real satisfaction that comes from being successful and how acting appropriately will get us what we want. So they will never actually get to experience that success of acting right and getting a reward for acting right in society. And then third, your child will flat out just become a brat. They'll become a spoiled brat because they feel that every little thing should be given to them no matter how they behave. So those are three main things that Sidman talked about, how positive reinforcement could be a bad thing, but only if you are over reinforcing your child for no apparent reason at all. So how do we meet the happy medium of not under-reinforcing but also not over-reinforcing? So Sidman believes that there are multiple secrets to positive reinforcement. First is to set up realistic contingencies that we know our child can meet. Therefore, we should not ask our children a complex request that we know that they might not be able to complete. We want our children to be and feel successful, so starting them off with small victories is the way to build that self-confidence within them and also build trust within the child and the caretaker that, okay, if I do something correct, I will get rewarded by my caretaker. Second, we should provide reinforcers that the child actually wants and consequences that they do not want. So a child will not work for something they do not care about. So we must make the reinforcer appealing to the child and not just for us. It needs to be appealing for the child and not the adult. Third and lastly, we should always turn failures into teachable moments. Instead of punishing a child for their failures, we should teach them why what they are doing is wrong and help them understand the consequence in the future. If they continue to do the same behavior, that there will be consequences. So it's important that we just make these failures into teachable moments and not right away punish them when they have one failure. So those are three very important things that will help you successfully apply positive reinforcement in the home. Now, sometimes children act out as their own type of reinforcer. For example, maybe an older sibling will hit their baby brother in order to get mom attention. So they might think, well, if I hit my baby brother, I will get mom's attention all to myself. So we need to act before the antecedent occurs. So if we know that the function of this behavior is attention and that this child is using his behavior of hitting his brother as the behavior to get the reinforcer of his mom's attention, then maybe we need to take a step back and realize, well, maybe I need to give my older son attention before, like set aside time right after work where I can sit with him, read a book, play with his favorite Legos, watch a movie, so that this behavior doesn't occur and we can extinct the behavior. So we need to kind of watch how our child reacts and what behaviors they're using as reinforcers for themselves so that we can act before them and help them, give them what they need, but so that they don't have to act out. So those were the main points I gathered from Sidman's part of the in-home of positive reinforcement. So now I'm going to go to the in-school. So I know that every single person who is listening to this has used positive reinforcement in their school setting, and I'm sure that we can all agree with Sidman that when we use positive reinforcement effectively, it is one of the most powerful tools used to teach a child. But Sidman believes that most teachers are not actually taught the greatness of positive reinforcement through data and through scientific research. He believes that they actually just learn it because they've used it once or twice and they realize, wow, hey, this actually does work and I'm going to continue to use it. It's not really taught, going in to be a teacher. They don't really sit you down and teach you about positive reinforcement. So most people are, so when you think about it, he talks that most people are actually only trained in the classroom with how to deal with failures rather than how to deal with a child's success. I'm sorry, my cat keeps crying. So Sidman had a couple general principles for when it comes to using positive reinforcement in the school setting. One, the teacher should get the student to do something new and then quickly reinforce them. For example, when you ask the child to spell a word and they get it right, immediately reinforce him or her with a compliment, with a prize, give him a note to their parents saying how amazing they did. Maybe ask another teacher to come into the room and be like, oh my gosh, this kid, he spelled this word correctly. And then have them show off their skills, show off their talents. So immediately reinforce them and make them feel proud of what they're doing. And then the second step that comes to using positive reinforcement as a school is to eventually fade out all of those positive reinforcement so that in the end, learning actually becomes the reward. So how do we do that? So we give learners the opportunity to use their new and improved skills in the classroom. For example, once the child learns how to write and read and actually understand what they are reading, we should give them the opportunity to pick out a book of their choosing and then read it back to the class or read it back to the teacher so that their learning actually becomes reinforcing in its own. So trial and error is the next part of was the next section of the in-school positive reinforcement. And trial and error is within learning, and it's pretty much asking who is trial and who is error within learning. So even in the best case scenarios, when the most proficient learners, positive reinforcement cannot always take away coercion by itself. So there are always instances where there's that coercion is going to be there, and positive reinforcement cannot get rid of it all. Therefore, successful teachers must involve other strategies besides positive reinforcement to their students who have learned something new. So this is a key factor to remember, because when it comes down to it, learning is built off of trial and error and how we learn off of our past mistakes. So when we think about it, an effective teacher should never reinforce mistakes. But this is where coercion actually comes into play. Because if we withhold reinforcement from a learner, then we are actually punishing them. So when we cannot reinforce a learner, we often lean towards escaping them, avoiding them, or counterattacking the situation, which ultimately leads to our learners going in the same direction of doing the same exact things as we're doing. So how do we get rid of this coercion in the school? So let's see. Well, we would just get rid of any type of failure. Obviously, we could never do that. We could never get rid of failure in the classroom. But the good thing is that there's many new strategies that have been made to make this goal more reachable. For example, the use of errorless teaching is a way to teach without producing failures, which in turn leads to trial and error, which makes trial and error just into a trial. So we're getting rid of that error. So errorless teaching completely wipes out that error so that the child never feels like they're making an error. So errorless learning is a large and active research area that still has many years of research to figure out all the possibilities it has to offer, as well as limitations it could cause. But what we do know is that errorless teaching has the potential to remove the last bit of coercion from the educational setting, because there will be no need to extinguish error, because there will be no errors. This will help students feel more confident and successful in school, and in turn make school a more rewarding experience for students rather than an annoyance in their life. So that's what brings me to my final question, which I am asking you guys is, have you ever used errorless teaching? If so, give an example. And do you believe errorless teaching could completely extinguish coercion from the educational setting? Thank you guys for listening. I'm sorry if I talked really fast. It was a lot of points to cover, but thank you again.